Danny Carter had never seen the inside of a first-class cabin before. He stood at the entrance of the interstellar transport vessel and looked at his ticket 3 times just to make sure he was not dreaming. The words were clear: Seat 3A, First Class, Destination Station. He was a mechanic. He had spent the last 12 years of his life crawling through dirty engine rooms and fixing broken ships. His hands were rough and stained with grease that never fully washed away. His clothes were simple and worn. He did not belong in first class. But 2 weeks ago, his company had held a lottery for all workers, and somehow his name had been pulled from the box. Now here he was, walking past the economy section with its narrow seats and crowded rows, heading toward the front of the ship where the air smelled cleaner and the lights were softer. The first-class cabin was beautiful. The seats were wide and covered in soft fabric. Each one had its own small window that looked out into the stars. There were only 8 seats in the whole cabin, and each passenger had enough space to stretch their legs and sleep comfortably. Danny found seat 3A and sat down slowly, afraid he might break something expensive. A flight attendant, a young woman with kind eyes, brought him a warm towel and a glass of something fizzy. He thanked her quietly and looked around. The other passengers were dressed in fine clothes. Some of them worked on small computers. Others read books or talked softly to each other. None of them looked at Danny. He was invisible to them, and that was fine with him. The ship was scheduled to leave in 20 minutes. Danny leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. He thought about his mother waiting for him on station. She had been sick for a long time, and the doctors said she needed a special treatment that cost more money than Danny had ever seen in his life. He had been saving every credit he could, working extra shifts, skipping meals, but it was never enough. This trip was the first time he had taken any time off in 3 years. He just wanted to see her face again. He just wanted to hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay, even if he was not sure it was true. The sound of raised voices pulled Danny from his thoughts. He opened his eyes and looked toward the entrance of the first-class cabin. The flight attendants were gathered there, speaking in worried tones. Behind them, Danny could see something large trying to come through the door. It was a... Danny had seen pictures of them before, but he had never met one in person. They were a species of dragon-like beings from a distant star system. They stood nearly 8 feet tall on powerful legs. Their bodies were covered in thick scales that could be red, black, gold, or silver. They had long necks, sharp teeth, and wings that folded against their backs. They were proud warriors who valued honor above all things. This was old. Danny could see it in the way his scales had faded from what was once bright red to a dull rust color. Deep scars crossed his face and chest. One of his wings was torn and hung at an awkward angle. He walked with a limp, leaning on a metal cane that looked like it had been made from the barrel of an old plasma rifle. But what caught Danny's attention most was the sash across the creature's chest. It was covered in medals and ribbons, the kind given to soldiers who had served in the Galactic Coalition during the Frontier Wars. Danny recognized some of them. His own father had earned similar medals before he died. The flight attendants were explaining something to the old dragon. Danny could not hear all of it, but he caught enough words to understand the problem. They had a ticket for economy class, but his large, injured body could not fit in the narrow seats. The first-class cabin was fully booked. There was no room for him. The old dragon listened without arguing. When the attendants finished speaking, he simply nodded his great head and turned to leave the ship. There was no anger in his eyes. There was only a quiet sadness, the kind that comes from a lifetime of carrying heavy burdens. Danny stood up before he knew what he was doing. "Wait," he said. His voice was louder than he expected, and several passengers turned to look at him. "He can have my seat." The flight attendant stared at him. The old stopped and slowly turned around. "Sir," one of the attendants said, "are you sure? This is a 12-hour flight. The economy section is quite uncomfortable." Danny looked at the old dragon. He looked at the medals on his chest, the scars on his scales, and the tired dignity in his golden eyes. He thought about his father, who had served in the same war and who had always told him that respect must be shown through actions, not just words. "I am sure," Danny said, "this soldier fought for all of us. He deserves to be comfortable." They studied Danny for a long moment. His eyes, which had seen countless battles and watched friends die among the stars, now looked at this small human with something like wonder. "You do not know me," the dragon said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "Why would you give up your seat for a stranger?" Danny shrugged. "My father served in the frontier wars. He always said that we should honor those who bled for peace. It is just a seat. You need it more than I do." The old dragon was silent. In culture, such acts of selfless kindness from strangers were rare. Their society was built on duty and obligation. You helped your clan, your brothers in arms, your sworn allies. But a stranger giving up something valuable for no reward, that was almost unheard of. "I am," the dragon finally said, pressing one clawed hand against his chest in a formal greeting. "I thank you, human. I will not forget this kindness." "Danny Carter," he replied with a small smile. "And you do not have to thank me, just get some rest. You look like you have earned it." Danny gathered his small bag and walked past toward the economy section. The other first-class passengers watched him go, some with confusion, others with something that might have been shame. None of them had offered their seats. As Danny squeezed into a narrow economy seat between a sleeping trader and a crate of cargo, he did not feel any regret. He felt something warm in his chest, something that had been missing for a long time. He felt like his father would have been proud. And in the first-class cabin, settled into seat 3A and watched the stars through the window. For the first time in many years, the old warrior felt something he thought he had lost forever. He felt hope. The first-class seat was more comfortable than anything had felt in decades. The soft fabric supported his old bones, and the warmth of the cabin eased the constant ache in his torn wing. He should have been able to sleep easily for the first time in years. But he could not stop thinking about the human. Danny Carter, a simple name for a simple man. He wore cheap clothes and carried a bag that looked older than some of the stars outside the window. He was not rich. He was not powerful. He was not trying to impress anyone or gain any favor. He had just stood up and given away something valuable because he thought it was the right thing to do. Had lived for over 200 years. He had fought in 17 major battles and countless smaller ones. He had watched empires rise and fall. He had seen acts of great courage and terrible cruelty. But in all that time, he had rarely seen such pure, simple kindness from a stranger. The old dragon pressed a button on his armrest, and a flight attendant appeared beside him. "How may I help you, sir?" she asked politely. "The human who gave me this seat said, 'Danny Carter, can you tell me about him?'" The attendant looked surprised, but she nodded. "I can check the passenger records if you wish. Give me a moment." She returned a few minutes later with a small tablet in her hands. "Danny Carter, age 34, from Earth, Kansas region. He works as a spacecraft mechanic at the shipyard on Luna Station. This ticket was won in a company lottery. He is traveling to station to visit his mother, who is listed as his emergency contact." His mother repeated, "Is she well?" The attendant hesitated. "I should not really share medical information, but the records show she is receiving care at the medical center. She has been there for several months." Thanked the attendant and sat in silence for a long time. A mechanic, a man who fixed things with his hands, a man traveling to see his sick mother, and yet he had given up his one moment of comfort for a stranger he had never met. The dragon made a decision. He pressed another button and asked the attendant to deliver a message to Danny Carter. He wanted to speak with him in the observation lounge. Danny was surprised when he received the invitation. He had been trying to sleep in his cramped seat, but the snoring trader beside him made that impossible. He followed the attendant through the ship to a small room at the back where large windows showed the endless stars outside. Was waiting for him. The old dragon sat on a bench that had been built for larger species, his cane resting against his leg. When Danny entered, gestured to a seat across from him. "Please sit," the dragon said. "I wish to thank you properly." Danny sat down and shook his head. "You already thanked me. You do not have to do anything else." "In my culture, a debt must be honored," said. "You gave me something when you had no reason to. I must understand why." Danny was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the stars, thinking about how to explain something that felt so natural to him. "My father was a soldier," he finally said. "He fought in the frontier wars when I was young. He told me stories about the who fought beside him. He said your people were the bravest warriors he ever saw. He said you never left a wounded soldier behind, even if it meant dying yourself." Nodded slowly. "That is our way. A true warrior protects those who cannot protect themselves." "My father believed the same thing," Danny continued. "He always said that being good to others was not about getting something back. It was just the right way to live. When I saw you standing there with all those medals on your chest, I thought about him. I thought about how he would want me to act." "Your father sounds like an honorable man," said. "He was." Danny's voice grew soft. "He died 8 years ago. His heart gave out. All those years of war caught up with him eventually." The two sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars drift past, then began to speak. He told Danny about his own life, about the battles he had fought and the friends he had lost. He spoke about a human soldier named Bate who had saved his life during the Battle of Station. She had dragged him to safety even though he was 3 times her size and the enemy was closing in all around them. "I asked her why she risked her life for me," said. "She told me that humans do not leave their friends behind. I told her we had only met that morning. She just smiled and said that was enough time to become friends." Danny laughed softly. "That sounds like something a human would say." "It changed how I saw your species," admitted. "Before that day, I thought humans were small and weak. After that day, I understood that strength is not about the size of your body. It is about the size of your heart." Danny told about his own life. He talked about growing up poor, about learning to fix machines because he was good with his hands, about working long hours in cold engine rooms to send money home to his mother. He talked about his dream of one day opening his own repair shop, a place where he could be his own boss and build something that would last. "Why have you not done this?" asked. Danny sighed. "Money. It is always money. Everything I earn goes to my mother's medical bills. The treatment she needs is expensive, and I am still far from having enough. Sometimes I think I will be working in other people's engine rooms for the rest of my life." Listened carefully. He saw the weariness in Danny's eyes, the weight he carried on his shoulders. This human had every reason to be bitter and selfish, and yet he had given away his seat to a stranger without a second thought. The hours passed quickly as the two talked. By the time the ship announced it was approaching station, they had shared more stories than either of them expected. They had laughed together and sat in thoughtful silence together. They had become something that neither of them had anticipated. They had become friends. As Danny stood to return to his seat for landing, reached out and grasped his hand. The dragon's grip was firm but gentle. "Danny Carter," said, "you have given me more than a seat today. You have reminded me that there is still good in this galaxy. I will not forget you." Danny smiled and shook the dragon's hand. "Take care of yourself. Maybe I will see you around the station." He walked back to economy class, not knowing that the old dragon was already making plans, had decided that this human's kindness would not go unrewarded. A debt had been created, and intended to pay it back 100 times over. Station was one of the largest space stations in the galaxy. It floated in orbit around a blue gas giant, its metal arms stretching out like the branches of a great tree. Millions of beings from hundreds of different species lived and worked there. Ships came and went at all hours, carrying cargo and passengers to distant stars. When the transport vessel landed, Danny Carter gathered his small bag and made his way through the crowded docking bay. He did not look back at the first-class cabin or think about the comfort he had given up. His mind was focused on one thing only: his mother. The medical center was on the far side of the station. Danny took a transit pod through the busy corridors, watching the lights of shops and restaurants flash past the windows. He did not have money to spend on such things. Every credit he had went toward his mother's care. Carter was in room 417. When Danny pushed open the door and saw her lying in the hospital bed, his heart broke a little more. She had always been a strong woman, but now she looked so small and fragile. Her hair had turned gray and her skin was pale. Machines beeped softly around her, monitoring her weak heartbeat. But when she saw her son, her face lit up with the most beautiful smile Danny had ever seen. "Danny," she whispered, reaching out her thin hand. "You came." Danny rushed to her side and took her hand gently. "Of course I came, Mom. I am sorry it took so long." They talked for hours, asked about his work and his life on Luna Station. Danny lied and told her everything was fine, that he was saving money and would have enough for her treatment soon. He did not tell her that he was drowning in debt. He did not tell her that some nights he went to bed hungry because he had sent his food allowance to the hospital. She did not need to know those things. She just needed to know that her son loved her. When visiting hours ended and Danny had to leave, he kissed his mother on the forehead and promised to come back tomorrow. He walked out of the medical center with heavy steps, his heart full of love and worry. He did not know that someone was watching him. Had not left the station after landing. Instead, he had used his old military contacts to find out more about Danny Carter. What he learned made his ancient heart ache with sympathy. Danny's mother had a rare disease that was slowly destroying her body. There was a treatment that could save her, but it cost more than most people earned in 10 years. Danny had been paying for her basic care, but the life-saving treatment was far beyond his reach. At the rate he was saving, it would take him another 20 years to afford it. Carter did not have 20 years. The doctors said she had less than one. Stood in the shadows of the medical center and watched Danny walk away. The human's shoulders were slumped, and his steps were slow. He looked like a man carrying the weight of a mountain on his back. The old dragon made a decision. He returned to his temporary quarters and activated his communication terminal. It was time to call in some old debts. The first call went to General Aura, one of the highest ranking in the military council. Aura was younger than, but they had served together in the bloodiest battles of the frontier wars. They had saved each other's lives more times than either could count. When Aura's face appeared on the screen, his golden eyes widened in surprise. "Old friend," the general said, "I thought you had retired to the quiet corners of the galaxy. What brings you to call me?" Told him everything. He described meeting Danny on the transport vessel, the selfless act that had touched his heart, and the human's desperate situation. He spoke of Carter lying in her hospital bed and the treatment that could save her life. "This human showed me kindness when he had nothing to gain," concluded. "He honored our service with his actions. I believe we should honor him in return." Aura listened carefully. When finished, the general was silent for a long moment. "You speak truly, old friend," Aura finally said. "Such honor must be recognized. What do you propose?" The second call went to a human woman named Bate. She was no longer the young soldier who had dragged to safety all those years ago. She was now Admiral, retired from active duty but still respected throughout the coalition. Her hair had turned silver and lines marked her face, but her eyes were still sharp and kind. When she saw on her screen, she laughed with delight. "You old lizard," she said with warm affection. "I thought you had finally gone off to sleep in some quiet cave. How are you?" told her the same story he had told Aura. He described Danny's sacrifice and his mother's illness. He explained his plan to repay the humans' kindness. Admiral listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "You know," she said, "I have always believed that the best of humanity shows itself in small moments. This Danny Carter sounds like exactly the kind of person we should be celebrating. Count me in." Over the next 2 days, made more calls. He reached out to veterans and human officers who had served together during the war. He contacted business leaders and politicians who owed him favors. He spoke to members of the trade consortium, powerful merchants who controlled shipping routes across half the galaxy. Each time he told them about Danny Carter. Each time they listened, and each time they agreed to help. By the end of the second day, had gathered enough support to change Danny's life forever. The funds for his treatment had been collected. The backing for Danny's dream repair shop had been secured. Everything was in place. Now came the hardest part, telling Danny. Knew that the human would resist. Danny was proud in his own quiet way. He did not like accepting charity. He believed in earning his way through hard work. But this was not charity. This was honor. This was the repayment of a debt that Danny did not even know he had created. Sent a formal invitation to Danny's temporary quarters on the station. It requested his presence at the embassy the following afternoon. No explanation was given. Then the old dragon sat back and waited. Tomorrow, Danny Carter would learn that one small act of kindness could change everything. Tomorrow, the incredible would happen. Danny read the invitation 3 times. He stood in his small, rented room on station, holding the official message on his tablet, trying to understand what it meant. The embassy was requesting his presence for a formal ceremony. His name was written in both human letters and script. He thought it must be some kind of mistake. Danny had never been to an embassy. He had never attended a formal ceremony. He was a mechanic who fixed broken engines for a living. He did not belong in the world of diplomats and generals. But the message was clear, and it mentioned by name. Danny remembered the old dragon from the transport vessel, their conversation in the observation lounge, the stories they had shared. Perhaps simply wanted to say a proper goodbye. Danny put on his cleanest shirt, which was still worn and faded, and made his way to the section of the station. The embassy was impressive. Tall doors made of dark metal stood at the entrance, carved with images of dragons in flight. Guards in ceremonial armor stood on either side, their scales polished until they gleamed. When Danny approached, they looked at him with curious eyes but stepped aside to let him pass. Inside, the embassy was even more beautiful. The walls were decorated with tapestries showing famous battles and ancient heroes. Lights hung from the ceiling like captured stars. The air smelled faintly of incense and something warm that Danny could not identify. An attendant led him through several hallways until they reached a large chamber. When the doors opened, Danny stopped in his tracks. The room was filled with people. Not just any people. Danny saw in military uniforms, their scales ranging from deep red to bright gold. He saw humans in coalition dress uniforms, medals shining on their chests. He saw other species too, representatives from races that had fought alongside humans and during the frontier wars. And at the front of the room stood. The old dragon looked different today. His faded scales had been polished, and he wore a ceremonial robe over his body. Beside him stood a younger with bright golden scales and the insignia of a general. On his other side was an elderly human woman with silver hair and kind eyes, wearing an admiral's uniform. Danny wanted to turn and run. He did not understand what was happening, and he did not like being the center of attention. But before he could move, called out to him. "Danny Carter," the old dragon said, his deep voice filling the chamber. "Please come forward." The crowd parted to create a path. Danny walked forward slowly, feeling every eye in the room watching him. His heart was beating so hard he thought everyone must be able to hear it. When he reached the front of the room, placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. "Friends and honored guests," announced, "I have gathered you here to recognize a human who showed me extraordinary kindness. 3 days ago, on a transport vessel, this man gave up his first-class seat so that an old, injured dragon could travel in comfort. He asked for nothing in return. He expected no reward. He did it simply because he believed it was the right thing to do." Danny's face turned red with embarrassment. "It was just a seat," he mumbled. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," said the human admiral, stepping forward. Her voice was gentle but firm. "They would not. I was there, Danny. I reviewed the security footage. The first-class cabin was full of wealthy passengers and not one of them moved. Only you." She smiled at him. "My name is Bate. Many years ago, I served within the frontier wars. He tells me that your father served as well." Danny nodded. "Yes, ma'am, he did." "Then he raised a fine son," Admiral said. "He would be proud of you today." The golden-scaled stepped forward next. His presence was commanding, and Danny could see the respect that everyone in the room had for him. "I am General Aura of the High Council," he said. "Has told me your story. He has told me of your struggles, your sacrifices, and your dreams. He has asked us to honor your kindness, and we have agreed." Aura reached into his robe and pulled out a small metal badge. It was shaped like a dragon's claw holding a human hand. "Danny Carter," the general said formally, "by the authority of the High Council, I name you an honorary member of the Warrior Brotherhood. This title has never before been given to a civilian. You will be the first." Danny stared at the badge in disbelief. "I cannot accept this. I am not a warrior. I just fix engines." "You are wrong," said softly. "A warrior is not defined by the battles he fights. A warrior is defined by the honor he carries in his heart. You have more honor than many soldiers I have known." Admiral stepped closer. "There is more, Danny. We know about your mother." Danny's breath caught in his throat. "My mother." "Carter currently receiving care at medical center," continued gently. "She needs a treatment that you cannot afford. The veterans here, both and human, have collected funds to pay for her treatment in full. She will receive the best care available, and it will cost you nothing." Danny felt his legs go weak. He reached out and grabbed his arm to steady himself. Tears began to form in his eyes. "Why," he whispered, "why would you do this for me?" "Because you showed us that kindness still exists," said. "Because you reminded us why we fought in that war all those years ago. We did not fight for territory or power. We fought so that good people like you could live in peace." General Aura spoke again. "There is one more gift. The Trade Consortium wishes to invest in your future. They will provide full funding for a repair shop here on station. It will be a joint human business, a symbol of the alliance between our species." Danny could not speak. The tears were flowing freely now, and he did not try to stop them. He looked around the room at all the faces watching him, humans and dragons and others, all gathered here because of one small act of kindness on a spaceship. Admiral put her hand on his arm. "Your simple gesture reminded us of something important, Danny. Humans are not special because of our technology or our military strength. We are special because of moments like the one you created. You saw someone in need and you helped without thinking about yourself. That is what humanity means." Danny wiped his eyes and looked at. The old dragon's golden eyes were shining with emotion. "Thank you," Danny managed to say. "I do not know what else to say, just thank you." Smiled, showing his ancient teeth. "Do not thank us yet, Danny Carter. This is just the beginning." 6 months had passed since that day at the embassy. The seasons had changed on distant Earth, ships had traveled millions of miles across the stars, and Danny Carter's life had become something he never could have imagined. Carter and his repair bay stood on level 7 of station, near the main docking area where ships came and went all day long. The shop was not the biggest on the station, but it was one of the busiest. A large sign hung above the entrance showing a human hand and a dragon's claw working together to repair an engine. Below the image were the words that Danny and had chosen together, built on honor. Today was a special day. It was the official grand opening ceremony, 6 months after they had first opened the doors for business. Danny had wanted to wait until everything was perfect, until he could show the world what they had built together. The shop floor was crowded with visitors. Engineers and mechanics from across the station had come to see the famous repair bay they had heard so much about. Traders stood beside human pilots, sharing drinks and stories. Representatives from the coalition government mingled with workers in grease-stained uniforms. Danny stood near the main workbench, wearing his best clothes, which were still simple and practical. He had refused to buy expensive things even after his life had changed. Old habits were hard to break. Beside him stood. The old dragon had moved to station permanently. Despite his age and his injuries, he worked alongside Danny every day. His knowledge of starship engines was incredible, learned over 2 centuries of traveling among the stars. He could look at a broken system and know exactly what was wrong just by listening to the sounds it made. But more than that had become family. He ate dinner with Danny and every Sunday. He told stories of ancient battles to the children who came to visit the shop. He had found a purpose again, a reason to wake up every morning, and it had given him new strength. "I never thought I would end my days covered in engine grease," said, looking around the shop with pride. "But I cannot imagine a better fate." Danny smiled. "You know, when I gave you that seat, I never expected any of this." "That is precisely why it happened," replied. "True kindness expects nothing. That is what makes it powerful." The front doors opened, and the crowd turned to look. A small woman with gray hair walked in slowly, supported by a young nurse. She was thin and moved carefully, but her eyes were bright and alive. Carter had survived. The treatment had worked. It had taken months of recovery, but the disease that had been killing her was gone. She would never be as strong as she once was, but she was alive. She could laugh and smile and hold her son's hand. She could watch him build his dream. When she saw Danny, her face lit up with that beautiful smile he loved so much. "Mom," Danny said, rushing to her side, "you should be resting. The doctor said you need to take it easy." "I would not miss this for anything," said firmly. "I want to see what my son has accomplished." Danny led her slowly through the shop, showing her the different workstations and the tools they used. He introduced her to the mechanics who worked for them, humans and others who had come from across the galaxy to be part of something special. Looked at everything with wonder. She had spent her whole life worrying about money, about bills, about whether her son would have enough to eat. Now she was standing in a business that her son owned, surrounded by people who respected him and called him friend. When they reached stopped, the old dragon bowed to her in the traditional way, one hand pressed against his chest. "Carter," he said formally, "it is my honor to finally meet you. Your son has told me much about you." Reached up and touched his face with her small hand. "And he has told me about you. Thank you for watching over him. Thank you for being his friend." "Your son restored something in me that I thought I had lost," said, his voice thick with emotion. "Faith. Hope. The belief that the galaxy still has good people in it. I should be thanking you for raising such a man." Smiled and wiped a tear from her eye. "He learned it from his father, and his father learned it from soldiers like you." The ceremony continued. General Aura gave a speech about the partnership between humans and Admiral talked about the importance of small acts of kindness in a vast and sometimes cold universe. Local reporters recorded everything, eager to share the story with viewers across the station. But the moment that stayed with everyone happened near the end of the day, when most of the visitors had gone home. Danny was cleaning up the shop floor when a young human boy tugged at his sleeve. The child was maybe 8 years old, with messy hair and curious eyes. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said. "Is it true what they say about you, that you gave your seat to a dragon and it changed everything?" Danny knelt down so he was at the boy's eye level. "It is true, but it was not about the seat. It was about seeing someone who needed help and deciding to do something about it." "Were you scared?" the boy asked. Danny thought about it. "No, I was not scared. I was just doing what I thought was right." The boy nodded seriously. "My mom says that is what heroes do." Danny shook his head. "I am not a hero, I am just a mechanic, but you do not have to be a hero to do good things. You just have to care enough to try." The boy smiled and ran back to his mother, who was waiting by the door. She nodded at Danny with respect before leading her son away. Had watched the exchange. He walked over and stood beside Danny, looking out the window at the stars. "You know," the old dragon said, "our story has spread far beyond this station. I have heard that it is being told on a dozen worlds. They are teaching it in schools to young ones of many species." Danny shrugged. "It is just a story about a seat on a spaceship." "It is a story about what humanity means," corrected him. "It is a story that reminds people that the smallest act can change everything. That kindness is never wasted. That honor lives in ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary hearts." Danny looked at his friend, at his mother resting in a chair nearby, at the shop they had built together. He thought about his father and the lessons he had taught. He thought about the long journey that had brought him here, to this moment, to this life he had never dared to dream of. "I guess one seat can make a difference," Danny said quietly. Placed his clawed hand on Danny's shoulder. "One seat, one human, one moment of choosing kindness over comfort. That is all it took to remind the galaxy why humanity matters." Outside the window, ships traveled between the stars, carrying people and cargo to distant worlds. And on every one of those ships, someone would eventually hear the story of a mechanic and a dragon, of a simple act of kindness that rippled outward until it touched the hearts of millions. In a galaxy full of wonders, the greatest wonder of all was still the human capacity for compassion. And it all started with one seat.